There's a lot of campaigns in Warhammer 3. At over 100 legendary lords, there's easily thousands of hours of game to experience, but with so much choice, there's bound to be some that fall through the cracks. So let's take a look at some underrated campaigns that you may not have tried, but are a whole lot of fun. But if you want to try these videos with no ads, become a channel member for just $1 a month. All the same videos, but none of the ads. Coming in 10th place we have Imric. Where other high elves are all about martial excellence, Imric is focused on all things dragons. He brings a bunch of buffs for dragons and dragon princes, allowing him to spam a ton of them no problem. However, his biggest draw is his dragon taming questline. This takes you all over the map to battle against and eventually tame a series of incredibly powerful dragon units. You can then slot these into your armies and unleash their power on your enemies. He's pretty straightforward with the exception of his remote starting location, but that just adds to his uniqueness. He's also quite challenging, which is a rare treat for high elves, making him great when you're craving a little bit more pushback. That starting location is in the middle of a lot of potential hostile factions, so he has no shortage of targets to turn his dragons towards. This isn't even mentioning the other options you have outside of taming dragons, which adds a whole other layer to his gameplay. Now sure, dragon princes may not be all that great, and dragons certainly have their downsides, but you will have some of the coolest battles you'll ever see, so it balances things out. Admittedly, this is probably one of the least underrated since he was pretty popular when he came out, but if you've hopped on the series with Warhammer 3, he's well worth checking out all these years later. Coming in 9th place we have Tic-Tac-Toe. The lizard men in general are hard to be underrated as their baseline racial mechanics are appropriately rated as terrible. However, Tic-Tac-Toe's gimmick is too much fun to miss. He's all about the flyers in the faction, and this comes with two main aspects. First of all, skink heroes immediately gain a flying mount, making them a lot more powerful from turn 1. And secondly, all pterodons have their bombardment upgraded from dropping rocks to dropping flaming explosive rocks. Granted, the practical damage increase is marginal at best, but it looks a whole lot cooler and lets you use these units for much more cinematic bombing runs alongside the usual skirmishing. He also has the ability to reset the movement range of all lords and heroes by way of a right, which can allow him to cover a crazy amount of distance in a single turn. It's a little niche but useful to have and gives him a nice gimmick of speedy flying dude. In 8th place we have Ungrim Iron Fist. It's probably slight hyperbole to call any dwarf faction underrated, since they're one of the most updated and therefore powerful factions in the game. However, I feel like Ungrim is so easy to ignore that people don't bother to play him much. If you want the same starting location, then Thorgrim offers more freedom. If you want a powerful battling lord, then play Grombrindle. And if you want a challenge, then Belegar is right there. And if you want the most overpowered faction in the game, well, we all know where Malachi is. However, whilst Ungrim may not be at the top of any of these categories, what he does have is an excellent blend of all three, making him a very fun lord, so long as you commit to the bit. That bit is of course Slayers, and his entire faction is built around them. If you fully surrender yourself to just using Slayers, you can have an incredibly fun themed campaign with a good bit of challenge. Instead of the usual gimmick of small limited armies of slow expensive units focusing on ranged, you instead go for many armies full of fast cheap units with a sole focus on melee attack. You'll spend a lot more time recruiting and replenishing than others, but you'll have a dwarf campaign like no other and probably grow an appreciation for shirtless dwarves. In 7th place we have Sigvald the Magnificent. Similar to the dwarves, I feel like calling any Warriors of Chaos underrated is kind of exaggerating just a smidge. The faction would be damn cracked with no faction and lord effects, but I'm going to cope by saying he's simply underrated inside the faction. Out of the three original Chaos Lords, he's not the Everchosen or a Dragon Ogre, so tends to fall to the side there. Out of the two Slaanesh Lords, he's also a dude compared to a demon, so once again can be overlooked. However, whilst he may not lead in every category, he's still a ton of fun and brings his own unique twist. His discount for gifts of Slaanesh is huge and allows him to make use of them a whole lot more for a whole lot less. His speed increases for melee infantry combined with the sweet Sorrow ability make his army incredibly fast even when heavily armoured. Plus his starting location is in the middle of the North Chaos Wastes, giving him lots of options to go take on Dark Elves, Norsca, or anyone else really. And lastly, you get to stare at this handsome chap all game long, and who doesn't want that? But for real, he's a deceptively strong lord even if he is limited to being a foot lord for the entire campaign. Excellent in melee, tons of ways to buff units and eventual regen, what's not to love? Coming in 6th we have Kugath Plaguefather. When Nurgle got their DLC and rework, I felt at the time that Kugath was a little bit redundant. He doesn't have the plague spamming abilities of Epidemius or the borderline Warriors of Chaos playstyle of Tamurchan Uwu. However, what he lacks in plague quantity, he semi-makes up for in plague quantity. Whilst he doesn't have the ability to make plagues with more symptoms, like I said he should, he can empower them more than anyone else. Right off the bat, he has more blessed symptoms per reset, meaning more potential for empowered plagues. Plus, every 10 levels he gains, that number only goes up. That means if you get him all the way to level 50, he'll have 7 blessed symptoms every single reset. This can allow you to craft some truly devastating plagues no matter where you need them. Plus, his own army is an expert plague spreader, making them cheaper to craft and easier to share. If you're planning on playing Nurgle and wondering if there's any point in checking out the lord who started it all, there absolutely is. Coming in 5th, we have Heinrich Kemmler. I had to get my precious vampire count babies on this list somewhere. My precious angels may still be waiting for their DLC, and I may well look like Manfred by the time it arrives, but the entire faction can be a lot of fun. However, I think Heinrich takes the cake as the most underrated and overlooked of the lot. Manfred has the desert and the books, Hellman has all his zombies near Cathay, and the von Karstein E-Daters have Drakenhof, which indirectly means the rest of the Empire. Heinrich is in a bit of a no man's land, with the Empire to the north and Bretonnia to the south, which makes him feel very isolated, but that's all part of the gimmick of being a vampire hiding in your castle. Besides, with your best pal Krell, who needs other friends? Krell aside, Heinrich has a bunch of skills empowering ethereal units in the faction, giving him a unique gimmick, albeit an unusual one for a Master Necromancer. Speaking of which, he can level other Necromancers super fast, which are the best generic lords and heroes in the faction, and he's an expert of the lore of vampires, so can spam the hell out of it during battle. I will add the caveat that he's almost certainly the weakest of the Vampire Count's lords, but he's still plenty of fun. Yeah, he might be between a very angry rock and another extremely angry rock and a bunch of extremely angry pebbles strewn around for good measure, but if you raise enough hell, it's just more fuel for the fire. Coming in 4th place, we have Elith Anar. 2 high elves on one list. Yeah, I make the rules, and this guy is super cool, so bite me. We all remember when the Warden and the Paunch DLC came out and everyone took to calling Eltharion High Elf Batman. Well, before that Batman, we had someone who fits the bill just as well, if not better. Aside from the killing people, he really enjoys that. Elith Anar is the most brutal of the Dark Elves, and that brutality brings with it some mechanics you can't find anywhere else. He gains various quests to assassinate specific characters, which gives you a lot more to do with heroes and some variety to which direction you want to move. He has a unique right to summon a legendary hero to help him out with this, and whilst it's not incredibly worth, it's something no one else has access to. He's also not above using sneaky tactics and gains access to stalking stands, allowing him to ambush on the move. This, combined with his use of shadow warriors, makes his faction into a stealth skirmishing extravaganza. And as a last cherry on top, the dude himself is a pretty unique battler amongst other high elves, with a powerful ranged focus and eventual mirror image ability for pulling aggro in battles. He's not all that complicated, but proves that high elves are about more than just learning your first campaign as Tyrion. Coming in 3rd place, we have Dryker. Honestly, I feel like the Wood Elves are one of the most underrated races as a whole. They are genuinely one of the strongest in the entire game, with one of the most unique playstyles, and yet I feel people are quite reluctant to give them a shot. Among the Wood Elves, Dryker is by far the most unique, and it's entirely down to the fact that she hates the actual elves in Wood Elves. She doesn't start with the Oak of Ages, so one of her first orders of business will be to get down there and take control so she can start building it up. This sends her to war against the other Wood Elf factions, which is something none of the other 3 would ever really consider. She's also heavily focused on tree spirits and reduces the efficacy of all elven units in her faction to enforce this. To give her more options, she has the Forest Spirit units, which essentially give her armies full of forest-based monsters. She's double-cheeked, meaning she's not the only thing made of wood. She can get Codil, who is probably the most powerful tree man unit in the entire game. She can make use of aspects on her Tree Spirit units. Essentially, if you want something truly different when playing the Wood Elves, then Dryker is absolutely the way to go. In 2nd place, we have Tretch Craventail. It feels kind of silly to call any Skaven underrated because they're kind of one of the most overpowered races in the world without unique faction mechanics even being taken into account. However, whenever I think about booting up a Skaven campaign, it's always going to be Ikit or Throt or maybe Snitch if I'm feeling sneaky. The other 3 tend to fall to the wayside and none more so than Tretch. However, hidden in this 3LC Cowardly Custard is one of the most hilarious ambush factions in the game. Like all Skaven, he has that busted ass stalking stance to ambush enemies on the move. However, whenever he declares a new war, all of his armies gain an increased ambush success chance, vanguard deployments, and more uses of the Menace Blow. Also, increased enemy reinforcement time, but literally, who even asked? This means the strat is to declare surprise wars and use those 3 turns to cause as much havoc as you possibly can to either end the war or make it so heavily in your favour that all you have left to do is clean up afterwards. He's definitely an acquired taste outside of this, with his main draw being more armour and base weapon damage for clan rats and storm vermin, but at least his army gets crazy attack and flanking power if you're into that sort of thing. He's far from the best rat, but he's still a lot of fun and one to check out if you're wanting something a little bit more stripped back. And in 1st place, it will always be Marcus Wolfart. He's been one of my favourite campaigns since he came out. He's pretty challenging, but he completely flips the playstyle of the Empire on its head, making it a totally new experience. You know the drill by now. He's off colonising Lustria, and it's just about the least friendly frontier imaginable. He has limited access to the roster, so has to rely on shipments from the Empire. Every move he makes causes further aggression from the locals. His own units have basically crap in their pants the deeper you go, and he has his merry band of heroes to give him a helping hand. He may now have to go a little further to hunt down Nakai, but there's no shortage of targets for the Hunts Marshal on Lustria. If you're a real Empire enthusiast, then I beg you to give Marky Mark a go. Once you get used to the challenge, it is a total blast. But who do you think is the most underrated Lord in Total War Warhammer 3? Let me know in the comments below, like the video if you did, subscribe for more, and if you want more ranking videos then why not check out this one all about the Cathayan Legendary Lords.